Formula 1 is back, and the 2025 season kicked off with a slow burn thriller in Australia. A rain-soaked Melbourne provided a real nail-biter for the drivers and the pit wall alike, with the constant threat of more rain and driver errors being an ever-present cloud over everyone on the grid. However, the ability of the drivers to deal with the clouds was massively dependent on the team behind them making the right calls. And it's clear that some did better than others. Strategy calls, anticipation of rain, and efficient communication can be make or break on wet weekends, and while it's down to the drivers to keep the car facing forwards, it's a hell of a lot harder to do when you are left on the wrong tyres. And it's fair to say that while every team around them looked to maximize the weekend, the Ferrari strategy team were once again found lacking, and Lewis Hamilton has had his first taste of what has undone great drivers before him. If this is a sign of what is to come, then the 7-time world champion could be in for a massively frustrating season. Want to know where it all went wrong for Ferrari this weekend? We'll give you a hint. It wasn't behind the wheel, and both drivers are pretty angry about the whole situation. And stick around, because as much as people are clowning on Liam Lawson, he was massively let down by Red Bull, as it looks like the Milton Keynes team are on their way to break yet another promising driver. So how exactly did things unfold down under? Well, the race didn't really start until lap 9, as a slew of drivers found themselves in the barrier before we even got going. It was always going to be a hard race for the rookies, as predicted by the likes of Alex Albon and Lewis Hamilton before the race, with Australia being a pretty unforgiving circuit at the best of times, but the greasy conditions and the constant threat of slickened paint all over the circuit only added to the jeopardy. Isaac Hadjar and Jack Doohan can take some solace in their early shunts, as they were joined by fellow rookie Fernando Alonso and the experienced Carlos Sainz in the barriers before the race truly got underway. Hopefully the rookies that didn't go the distance won't have their confidence rocked too much, as while they would have wanted to get to the checkered flag, there was truly no saving any of the spins that we saw that resulted in the release of the safety car. From Doohan to Bortoleto, their crashes were just pretty heavy learning bumps that they would have to experience at some point or other, so best to get them out of the way early, eh? Of the two rookies that managed to go the distance, the one who impressed the most was Andrea Kimi Antonelli, who not only managed to come home in P4, which would later be reduced to P5 through no fault of his own, but then reinstated to P4 after appeal, but early on in the race, he was the only man moving forwards through the field, demonstrating a mature drive for the 18-year-old rookie who is well known to have electric pace. The late safety car drama initiated by the late deluge and the incidents that followed opened up the field for many opportunists, something which the likes of Ferrari failed to capitalize on, while Alex Albon, Lance Stroll and Nico Hülkenberg all managed to seize the opportunities with their teams making the right calls. Albon was rightfully there anyway, but Williams capped off an impressive weekend with Albon now just being 7 points off of Williams' combined total from last season. They'll be hoping that Australia isn't a one-off, as the two cars looked very capable of scoring points on merit alone, so Carlos will be hoping to keep the car pointing forwards next time out in China, where it's anticipated that they could once again be fighting with the top 4 teams. So Ferrari, the team that looked most likely to challenge McLaren in testing, the team with the most anticipated driver lineup of the off-season, and the team with the second most momentum at the back end of last year. However, for as much as they had going for them, there's one thing that Ferrari has been incapable of escaping moving into the 2025 season: the dreaded bozo gene. Karun Chandhok was quick to point out that the Ferrari blunders didn't happen without warning from their drivers, as the drivers were quick to question the decision to stay out on the inters before they eventually stopped late, falling to the rear of the points. They took a risk, thought the shower would be short and the drivers could survive, and when the rain stopped, they would be fine, but as it transpired, that wasn't the case. Lewis came on the radio and said it was too dangerous, we have to stop. They underestimated how much water there would be on track and went way down the order. Disappointing for them. Lewis Hamilton has not gone to Ferrari for 1 point. However, for Hamilton, he knew to expect a tough weekend. The rain, combined with his first ever competitive drive using a different power unit than the Mercedes he is accustomed to, was going to be hard no matter what, but it's clear that more points were on the table even with all those factors, as he experienced being let down by Ferrari's strategy team far earlier in his career in red than any of us could have anticipated. Following the race, Hamilton wasn't coy in his criticism, both of the car and the team. It was very tricky and went a lot worse than I thought it would go. The car was really hard to drive today. For me, I'm just grateful I kept it out of the wall because that's where it wanted to go most of the time. A lot to take from it, and just getting acclimatized with the new power unit in wet conditions. The settings it requires are different, and a different way of driving and a different setup on the steering wheel. I hung out there as long as I could, got in the lead at one point, just the guidance with how much more the rain was coming was missing there, so I think we missed out. Another issue that Hamilton faced outside of Ferrari's infamous strategy blunders was the communication with his new race engineer. While he managed to avoid the dreaded "we are checking" that plagued the likes of Sebastian Vettel, it became apparent that Hamilton expected far more efficient and concise communication. Now, if it was just Hamilton and his new engineer ironing the kinks out, you could forgive the miscommunications as learning bumps. However, Leclerc was also struggling with the constant over-communication from his engineers. And what's worse is that it was ultimately lumped on Leclerc to make a last-minute tyre decision rather than dictating the strategy from the pit wall, when they could see multiple cars sliding off of the circuit as the rain picked up. The one positive thing that we can take away from Ferrari's woeful communication is possibly the funniest radio message I've heard in quite some time, with the "must be the water" comment being a prime example that some things do not change at Ferrari. So the Ferrari drivers will walk away from Melbourne massively disappointed, as being 7th in the constructors behind not only those they knew they would be fighting, but the opportunists that managed to come forward and capitalize on their blunders is not exactly where they wanted to be. The big worry for Ferrari is the fact that on merit alone, Williams looked to be the real deal, but whether or not that feat can be repeated across multiple circuits is still yet to be seen. Another driver who will walk away from the weekend massively disappointed will be Liam Lawson, who despite his self-criticism was ultimately let down by his new team. Not only did he lose out on crucial running all throughout testing, but a power unit failure left him without FP3 and a compromised run in qualifying left him P18 and ultimately starting from the pit lane. While he wasn't exactly setting the timing boards alight in Melbourne, the decision to leave him on dry tyres as the field adapted to the wet conditions ultimately left the Red Bull driver with an impossible task as he tried to keep the car facing the right way as the heavens opened up. As much as people will be clowning on Lawson for his performance in Australia, as let's face it, that's a plague that will always face the second Red Bull seat, it has to be said that the cards he was dealt were ultimately not representative of his actual capabilities. The issue is, Red Bull have only protected 2 drivers in recent years, one who had the backing of one of the richest men in the world, and the other who was like a son to the team principal. We have a feeling that Lawson will not be afforded the same patience, and he is very fortunate that Yuki lost out in the back end of the race in the final safety car, because an RB finishing just 3 places behind Max would have made the criticism leveled at the Kiwi far more intense. One thing is for sure, both Lawson and Ferrari will be looking to have a far stronger weekend next week in China, as in 2025, with the field as tight as it has ever been, nobody can afford to have 2 weekends in a row where it all goes wrong. The ultimate winners of the season will be the most consistent teams, and some have clearly had better starts than others. But what do you think? Was this weekend just a one-off for Ferrari and Lawson? Or is this actually a sign that things are not going to go well for them this season? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching.